Lunchtime at my desk was usually my little escape. I'd grab a quick sandwich, maybe scroll through a few news articles, and then dive headfirst into the endless scroll of social media. It was a mindless ritual, a way to disconnect for a few precious minutes before the afternoon rush hit. On this particular Tuesday, though, my usual routine took a sharp, unexpected turn. I was idly flicking through Instagram stories when a post from my younger sister, Emily, popped up. It was a picture, a bright, sunny shot of a cruise ship deck. Azure water stretched out to the horizon, the sky was a flawless blue, and there, beaming back at me, were all the familiar faces of my family. My parents, Robert and Carol, Emily herself, and even my older brother David, were clustered together, drinks in hand, looking utterly relaxed and happy. The caption read something generic about a much-needed family getaway with a heart emoji and a little ship icon. My thumb froze mid-swipe. A family getaway? My heart gave a little lurch. Had I missed an email? A text in the group chat? I racked my brain, trying to recall any mention of a vacation. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. It was like this trip had materialized out of thin air, and I was the only one who hadn't been clued in. I zoomed in on the photo, my eyes scanning every detail. There they were, my parents looking carefree, Emily laughing with a cousin I hadn't seen in ages, and David, who usually complained about everything, actually smiling. They all looked so united, so complete, and I wasn't there. It wasn't just that I wasn't in the picture, it was the crushing realization that I hadn't even known this cruise was happening. My stomach clenched. I quickly tapped on Emily's profile, scrolling through her recent posts. More pictures from the cruise, a fancy dinner in a ship restaurant, lounging by the pool, even a cheesy photo with the captain. Each image was another stab of exclusion. There were no messages from anyone in my family in my inbox, no casual mentions of an upcoming trip, no "wish you were here" texts, just silence, a complete and utter omission. Panic started to bubble in my chest. I navigated over to my messages and pulled up our family group chat. The last message was from me, almost a month ago, seeing if anyone had seen a new documentary I'd heard about. Crickets. No replies. At the time, I just shrugged it off, assuming everyone was busy. Now, staring at that unanswered question, it felt like another deliberate act of ignoring me. My hands felt clammy as I finally tapped on my mom's contact and hit the call button. She picked up on the third ring. "Hey, Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "Jonathan, how are you, dear?" she chirped, sounding perfectly normal, like we'd just spoken yesterday. "I'm okay," I started, my voice wavering slightly. "I just saw Emily's Instagram post. The one from the cruise?" There was a beat of silence on the other end, just a fraction of a second, but it felt like an eternity. Then she sighed, a drawn-out, weary sound. "Oh, that. Yeah, that," I repeated, a knot forming in my throat. "Where are you guys?" "Well, we're on a cruise," she said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "A cruise that I wasn't invited on," I stated, the words hanging heavy in the air. Another sigh. This one sounded almost annoyed. "Jonathan, honestly, we just figured you wouldn't be interested. You're always working so hard." I laughed, a short, bitter sound that held no amusement. "You just assumed? You planned a whole family cruise and didn't even think to ask me if I wanted to come?" "We didn't think you'd care," she said flatly. "You're always saying how busy you are. And frankly, you can be a bit of a downer sometimes, dear. We just wanted a relaxing trip." It felt like a punch to the gut. A downer? They hadn't even given me the chance to be anything. They had simply decided I didn't belong. The words hung in the air, cold and dismissive. A downer. So that was it. They hadn't forgotten me. They had actively decided against including me. The casual cruelty of it stung more than I could have imagined. It wasn't just about missing a vacation. It was about being deemed unworthy of their company. A buzzkill to their carefully curated family fun. A wave of nausea washed over me, quickly followed by a strange sense of detachment. It was like a switch had flipped inside me. For years, I had bent over backwards for my family, always the reliable one, the problem solver, the one who could always be counted on to help out, financially or otherwise. And this was my reward: exclusion and a casual insult. "So you just decided I didn't belong?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. Now, don't be dramatic, Jonathan, Mom said, her tone shifting to that familiar blend of exasperation and condescension. It's not personal. We just thought it would be best this way. She used my full name, the one she reserved for when she wanted to sound reasonable and firm, even when she was being anything but. Best for whom, Mom? I pressed, the calm facade starting to crack. Because it certainly doesn't feel best for me. I send you money every month. I helped pay off Dad's medical bills last year. I've always been there when you needed something. Oh, here we go, she sighed. Don't make this into a big deal, Jonathan. We're on vacation. Let's just leave it at that. I didn't scream, I didn't argue, I simply hung up the phone. The silence that followed was heavy, thick with unspoken resentments and a lifetime of feeling like I was always on the periphery of their lives. I sat there for a moment, the phone still pressed to my ear, staring blankly at the wall. No tears came, no immediate outburst of anger, just a profound sense of emptiness. Slowly, deliberately, I opened my banking app. My fingers hovered over the scheduled monthly transfer to my parents, a significant chunk of my paycheck that I sent without fail. It was due to go out in a couple of days. With a cold resolve, I canceled it. The confirmation message flashed on the screen, and a tiny part of me felt a flicker of satisfaction. Next, I navigated to our shared emergency fund account, the one I had been contributing to for years, always with the understanding that it was for unexpected crises. The balance was alarmingly low, barely scraping into four figures. Of course it was. I transferred every last penny into my own savings account, and then, with a few taps, removed my parents' access. Then I did something that felt both terrifying and liberating. I went back to my contacts and typed in my mother's name. My thumb hovered over the block contact button for a moment, a wave of uncertainty washing over me. This felt so final. But the image of their smiling faces on that cruise, coupled with my mother's dismissive words, hardened my resolve. I pressed the button. Then I did the same for my father, Robert, my sister, Emily, and finally my brother, David. My phone fell onto the couch, the screen going dark. I leaned back against my chair, a strange stillness settling over me. For the first time in years, I wasn't their safety net. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in a very, very long time, a fragile, budding sense of relief. The relief, however, was short-lived. By the next morning, my phone was buzzing incessantly, vibrating against my nightstand like an angry insect. Calls, texts, voicemails. The sheer volume was overwhelming. Notifications from Facebook, Instagram, even LinkedIn were popping up. People I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly reaching out. The first message I opened was from my Aunt Susan, my mother's sister. Hey, sweetie, your mom just called me sobbing. What on earth is going on? Then came a text from my cousin Lisa. Wait, did you seriously cut off your parents? What happened? The guilt trip started almost immediately. Jonathan, you're being unbelievably selfish. They gave you everything growing up, one message read. Another chimed in, family is family. You can't just abandon them like this. But one message stood out, a text from an unknown number. You really think you can just walk away from us after everything we've done for you? You're pathetic. Hope you enjoy being alone. I knew instantly it was my father. I stared at it, my heart still feeling strangely cold, and felt nothing. No anger, no sorrow, just a profound weariness. It dawned on me then. They weren't angry because they had hurt me. They were angry because they had lost access to the bank, me, and for the first time, I truly didn't care. I tossed my phone onto the bed, got up, and went to make coffee. The aroma filled my small apartment, a small comfort in the swirling chaos. I sat by the window watching the city wake up, the sounds of traffic, a distant hum. They could scream, guilt trip, manipulate. It didn't matter anymore. I wasn't going back. Not this time. I had finally drawn a line in the sand, and for once, I was going to hold it. No more rescues, no more bailing them out. Let them figure out what life looked like when they didn't have a son to exploit. Let them finally understand what it meant to be on their own. And me, for the first time in my life, I felt a flicker of something akin to freedom. The silence from my immediate family didn't last, of course. It never does. By the afternoon of the next day, my phone had become a weapon, a non-stop barrage of calls, texts, and notifications. I hadn't blocked everyone, just my parents and siblings, but their tentacles reached further, as they always do. Aunt Susan called again, this time more insistent. Cousin Lisa sent a string of increasingly concerned and slightly judgmental texts. Even my Uncle George, who I hadn't spoken to in months, left a rambling voicemail about the importance of family. The first text I opened that afternoon was from Aunt Susan. "Jonathan, your mother is in absolute tears. What is going on? She said you've just stopped helping them out financially, that you've cut off all contact. Are you okay?" Then another one popped up from Lisa. "Did you really abandon your parents after everything they've done for you? I can't believe it." Then came the avalanche. Dozens of variations on the same theme, each one hammering down on me like I was some monstrous traitor, a heartless child, an ungrateful son. It was as if I had woken up one morning and decided to punish my saintly parents out of sheer spite. What none of them seemed to ask, what none of them wanted to ask, was why. Not a single message said, "Hey, I heard what happened. I'm sorry that must have hurt." Not one person asked, "Did they really go on a cruise without you?" It was all just immediate need for information, condemnation, guilt, and control. I sat in my apartment, surrounded by the echoes of other people's expectations, staring at the pileup of digital judgment. And I realized something I hadn't fully admitted to myself before. They never saw me. They only saw the money. It wasn't just my parents who had gotten used to me being the one who fixed everything. It was the entire extended family. I was the success story, the responsible one, the one who always stepped up. When there was a funeral, I paid for the catering. When a cousin needed help with tuition, I offered. When there was a medical emergency, I was there with my credit card. But the moment I stopped, the moment I chose myself, they turned on me. The messages got worse. "You're being unbelievably selfish. You're turning your back on the people who raised you. Do you even remember what your parents sacrificed for you?" Sacrificed? They excluded me from a family vacation and told me, without a shred of shame, that they didn't want me there. My voice didn't matter. My presence didn't matter. But the money, that mattered plenty. I had thought that would be the worst of it. The texts, the guilt, the emotional manipulation. I was wrong. The real attack hadn't even started yet. It began 2 days later when I walked into work and saw the strange look on my boss, Mr. Harrison's face. He called me into his office, closed the door behind me with a soft click, and motioned towards a chair. "Got a second, Jonathan?" I sat down, trying to keep my breathing steady. Something felt off. "This morning," he began, folding his hands on his desk, "I received a call from your mother." The words felt like ice water down my spine. "She told me you were going through an emotional crisis," he continued, his eyes watching me carefully. "That you'd been making erratic financial decisions, and that you were pushing away your family. She said you needed some time off." My fists clenched in my lap. I forced my voice to remain calm. "That's not true, Mr. Harrison." "I didn't think it was," he said, leaning back in his chair. "I told her your private affairs are none of my concern, but I still had to check in." I nodded slowly, a wave of humiliation washing over me. "I'm fine. I cut off financial support to my parents because I felt like I was being taken advantage of. They're upset. That's all this is." He studied me for a moment. "I believe you, Jonathan. But this kind of interference isn't okay. If they contact the office again, you tell me immediately. Understood?" "Understood," I replied, the word feeling heavy on my tongue. When I left his office, a knot of dread tightened in my gut. It wasn't just embarrassment. It was betrayal. Layered upon betrayal. My own mother had tried to sabotage my job, painting me as unstable in a desperate attempt to shame or scare me back into compliance. They weren't content with guilt-tripping me through private messages. They wanted to publicly humiliate me, to destroy my stability if it meant regaining control over their financial lifeline. That evening, the pressure intensified. Voicemails, texts from new numbers, burner phones even. Messages from people I hadn't spoken to since high school started trickling in. "Hey, your mom said you won't respond to her. What's going on?" "They're saying you're acting strange. Should I be worried about you?" "Why are you doing this to your family?" One message caught my attention. It was from a distant relative I barely knew. "They said they're considering selling furniture to survive, Jonathan. Is that really what you want? The phrasing was perfect. Manipulative, weaponized compassion. The implication wasn't just that I was letting them suffer. It was that I was cruel for not preventing their inconvenience. Not poverty, not danger, just the discomfort of potentially having to sell a piece of furniture. I wanted to scream. Instead, I texted back a short, clipped reply. They're not struggling, they're manipulating. Please don't get involved. But people were involved because my family had dragged them in. Even my best friend Mark messaged me. Yo, dude, your mom hit me up on Facebook. I stared at the text, stunned. What did she say? I asked, my fingers flying across the keyboard. Seconds later, he sent a screenshot. It was a private message from my mother. Mark, I hate to bother you like this, but I'm really worried about Jonathan. He's been acting strangely, cutting off his family, making rash decisions. We're afraid he's depressed. If you hear from him, please encourage him to reach out. We just want to help. I called Mark immediately. Before I could even get a word out, he said, dude, don't worry. I don't believe any of it. Your mom has always been a bit dramatic. Thank you, I exhaled, the tension in my shoulders easing slightly. They're just angry because I stopped the money. I figured, he said, his tone turning serious. Still, that's low, really low. Yeah, I whispered, my throat suddenly dry. It is. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. My phone buzzed once every few minutes, a relentless reminder of the emotional ambush I was under. It was suffocating. They were trying to isolate me by pretending I was the one isolating myself. They were painting me as unstable because it was easier than admitting they had done something wrong. And worst of all, some people were starting to believe them. That was the real danger. Because if they could rewrite the story, turn me into the villain, the broken son, then they could reclaim their status as victims. And if enough people believed that narrative, then I would be the villain on a lone, cold-hearted. Not because I was, but because they said I was. I stared into the dark and realized something bone deep. This wasn't going to end with texts and phone calls. This was a war, and they were just getting started. There's only so much you can take before something inside you flips. After days of being hounded by messages smeared behind my back and painted as unstable to my own boss and friends, I finally reached my limit. I was done playing defense. I was done being quiet. If they wanted to involve everyone in this mess, fine. But I was going to tell the whole story. No more half-truths, no more hiding behind politeness or guilt. If they were going to twist the narrative, I was going to rip the curtain down and show everyone exactly what had been happening all these years. So I opened Facebook. Not a story, not a vague post hinting at something. A full status update set to public. My fingers hovered above the keyboard for a moment, a nervous energy coursing through me. Then I started to type. No drama, no insults, just the truth. Plain and sharp, like glass. Hey everyone, just to clear up some confusion, I began. I'm not having a breakdown. I haven't abandoned my family. I've simply stopped financially supporting my parents. I paused, took a deep breath, and continued. For years, I paid their bills, covered their debts, and provided for them while they lived comfortably. I sent $2,500 every single month to help out, and I never once complained. Recently, I found out they planned a family cruise and deliberately excluded me. Not by accident, not by scheduling conflict. They chose not to invite me. When I asked why, they said, "We didn't want you there." My fingers flew across the keyboard, the words pouring out of me. Since then, they've reached it out to my friends, my coworkers, and even my boss, telling them I'm mentally unstable and making poor decisions. This is all because I chose to stop funding their lifestyle. So if you hear anything from them about me being off or going through something, now you know the truth. I'm not unstable. I'm just done being used. I hit post, then I closed the app and waited. It didn't take long. Within minutes, the reactions started flooding in. Likes, comments, shares, private messages. Notifications were popping up so fast I couldn't even keep track. Some people were shocked. Others were angry on my behalf. The first message came from my cousin Lisa. Wait, they took a cruise without you, and you were the one funding them. That's messed up, Jonathan. Then Uncle George commented publicly on my post. Son, I had no idea. You've always been so generous. Don't let anyone guilt trip you for finally saying enough. Ashley, a friend I hadn't spoken to in months, sent a private message. They called me last week saying you were acting strange. I didn't realize it was because you cut them off. That's disgusting. Then came the public comments, a wave of support washing over me. People were calling them out, siding with me. One of my dad's old college buddies commented, "How can you say you're struggling when Jonathan was giving you $2,500 a month? That's more than what most people even make. Be honest for once." A family friend chimed in, "You had no issue using his money before, but now that the cash flow's gone, suddenly he's the bad guy? The hypocrisy is astounding." The carefully constructed image they had tried to protect, the poor innocent parents abandoned by their ungrateful son, was falling apart. And they were watching it unravel in real time. I could almost picture their faces sitting at their kitchen table, phones blowing up, seeing their lies exposed for everyone to read. No more whispered stories, no more one-sided conversations. The curtain had been pulled back, but I wasn't done yet. If they wanted to bring other people into this, I was going to make sure everybody understood what really happened. And that included the one person I should have called a long time ago, their landlord. I pulled up the number I had found online and dialed. "Hello," he answered after a few rings. "Hi, Mr. Ryan, this is Jonathan Jennings." A pause. "Ah, yes. Everything okay?" "I just wanted to let you know," I said slowly, deliberately, "that I will no longer be covering my parents' rent. Any previous arrangements, consider them over." Another pause, then a low chuckle on the other end. "Well, I figured this day would come eventually." That caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" "Your parents have been late with rent several times," he said, his voice calm but with a hint of knowing amusement. "But every time they'd say, 'Don't worry, our son will take care of it.' They treated it like a guarantee, like you were some sort of automatic safety net." My jaw tightened. So they hadn't just been taking my money, they had been openly relying on it, even to their landlord. "Well, that ends today. Understood?" "Understood." He said firmly. "I'll expect the rent on time next month. If not, they'll have to deal with the consequences." We ended the call and I sat there, the weight of the moment finally sinking in. For years, I'd been patching holes in their lives, covering their bad decisions, financing their comfort. And now, for the first time, they were going to feel what it was like to live without that crutch. That same evening, my phone pinged again. It was a text from my sister, Emily. "Are you seriously posting about our family on Facebook?" I didn't hesitate. I typed back a quick reply. "I'm not exposing anything, Emily. I'm correcting the lies our parents have been spreading." "This is humiliating for them," she retorted. "Maybe they should have thought about that before they tried to paint me as mentally unstable," I replied, my fingers shaking slightly. Silence. Then a single accusatory text. "You're being heartless." "No, Emily, I typed back, my voice barely a whisper as I read the words on the screen. "I'm being honest." She didn't reply after that. I could only imagine the chaos erupting on their end. Panic calls, desperate attempts to do damage control, frenzied explanations to every relative who had finally heard my side of the story. They had underestimated me. They thought I'd fold, like always, that I'd come crawling back. But not this time. This time, I wasn't the one with something to hide. They were, and the world was finally seeing it. It didn't take long for the fallout to reach my doorstep, literally. I was halfway through a microwave dinner when the pounding on my front door began. Not a polite knock. This was urgent, frantic, the kind of knocking that demanded immediate attention. It sounded like the person on the other side believed sheer force might break through, not just the door, but every boundary I had just spent weeks trying to build. I stood slowly, my appetite vanishing. I peered through the peephole. My mother. She stood there clutching her phone, her face pale and drawn, her body tense. I hesitated, my hand hovering near the doorknob for a split second. Part of me wanted to pretend I wasn't home, to let her stand there and stew in the consequences of her actions. But a deeper part of me, the one that had been quiet for years, was morbidly curious. What excuse would she give now? What new lie was she about to spin? With a sigh, I unlocked the door and pulled it open. She stepped forward immediately, but I instinctively blocked the entrance with my arm. Her face was drawn and swollen, her eyes red and puffy from crying. She looked like a woman at the end of her rope, and for just a moment, I wondered if this was the first time in years she'd ever felt what it was like to be at someone else's mercy. "Jonathan, please," she said, her voice cracking, thick with unshed tears. "We need to talk about what you've done." "About what I've done?" I asked calmly, raising an eyebrow. "Mr. Ryan called," she said, blinking quickly, as if even saying it aloud made it more real. "He told us you won't be paying the rent anymore." "I told you I was done, Mom," I replied, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. "Why is this a surprise?" Tears welled up in her eyes again, spilling down her cheeks. "We need you, Jonathan." "No, Mom," I corrected her, my voice still even. "You need my money." She recoiled slightly as if I'd slapped her. "We raised you," she whispered, her voice trembling. "We took care of you, and now that we're the ones who need help, you're turning your back on us." A bitter laugh escaped my throat before I could stop it. "You didn't seem to need me when you planned a whole vacation and didn't invite me, did you? You didn't need me when you told me I'd bring the energy down. Remember that?" Her mouth opened, but no words came out. She just stood there, her face a mask of wounded disbelief. "So let's be honest, Mom," I continued, my gaze unwavering. "You didn't see me as family. You saw me as a service. As long as the money showed up on time, you didn't care whether I existed or not. And the second I stopped being useful, you tried to destroy my reputation. You went to my friends, you called my boss, you tried to make me look crazy. And now what? You want forgiveness?" Fresh tears streamed down her face. "So you're just going to let us struggle?" I met her gaze, steady and unblinking. "You'll manage." She stared at me like she didn't recognize the person standing in front of her. And in a way, maybe she didn't. Maybe for the first time, she was meeting the version of her son who had finally drawn a line. Not the helper, not the fixer, not the ATM, just a man who had finally had enough. Her sorrow twisted slowly into something else. Anger. Her posture straightened, her eyes narrowed. "Fine," she snapped, her voice laced with venom. "If this is who you've become, don't expect us to ever forgive you." I leaned casually against the door frame, a small, wry smile playing on my lips. "Forgive me for what, Mom? For protecting myself? For setting boundaries? No, Mom. The only people who should be asking for forgiveness are you and Dad." Her jaw clenched. She turned without another word and walked away, her footsteps echoing down the hallway. I closed the door behind her and locked it. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I didn't second-guess my decision. I just stood there in the quiet, listening as her footsteps faded into silence. And I smiled. Because for the first time in my life, I had won. But the drama wasn't over yet. Within the hour, I got a message from Emily. "Mom came home distraught. What did you say to her?" "The truth," I replied simply. "You're being heartless," she shot back. "She's upset because she lost control, Emily. Not because she lost me." There was a pause, then a new message popped up, this time from my father. "You made your decision. Don't come crawling back when you regret it." I stared at it for a long moment, the words dripping with his usual brand of condescending arrogance. Then I typed back the last thing I would ever say to him. "I won't."